Early failure learning from it is a step forward, but virtual success, achieving the right plan but going in the wrong direction is real failure. The words ring out as a wake-up call, reminding us that not every achievement is progress and not every setback is the end. This book, called Startup by Eric Ries, was written from the sweaty and bitter experiences of his years as a technology startup. It does not celebrate eccentric geniuses or miraculous breakthroughs. Instead, it exposes the chaos behind the glamorous curtain of the startup world, and then proposes a method for managing that uncertainty as a scientific process, building and learning from idea to product, from product to customer. Every step must be backed by data and facts. In this, the concept of minimum viable product becomes a scalpel that cuts straight to the popular illusion that it has to be perfect to launch. Here the initial clumsiness is not a failure but a test to expose the assumption. Likewise, pivoting is not about betraying the vision but about having the courage to let go of the wrong to hold on to the right core. Asia Ting Innovative Accounting forces business people to face real numbers that reflect customer behavior, not fancy statistics. Behind every such concept is a profound paradox, the less clinging to false certainty. People have more opportunities to create something sustainable. The book doesn't promise an easy path, but emphasizes that sustainability comes only from countless rounds of small experiments, constantly colliding with reality. The question for each listener is, in work, in life, how much effort is being invested in unproven assumptions? How many plans are just lines on paper and still considered progress? And if we dare to look back, dare to consider each wrong step as an experiment, will our journey become lighter and truly more effective? Before going into the book review, we encourage listeners to buy and read it to fully experience the book's content. Because only when you read this book will you understand the issues I am talking about. Please buy the book and support the author. Now let's start reviewing this book with me. Starting a business is never just about launching a product. It is the creation of a living entity. An organization in a state of chaos and uncertainty. Many people often associate startups with a burst of creativity, with the bright light of genius. But bitter experience has taught that such myths are but a thin veneer covering a grim reality without proper governance. Most efforts fall into the void. I used to believe that hard work, big ideas, and a great team were enough. We have the product, the technology, the enthusiasm and the belief at the right time. But it all collapsed not because of lack of determination but because of lack of a process to turn sparks of ideas into a durable operating machine. The harsh truth is, most startups fail. Not because of lack of capacity but because of not knowing how to manage uncertainty. Many people when hearing about management in the context of startups immediately think of themselves. Management means long meetings and procedures that stifle creativity. So they chose the opposite path. Just do it, no rules needed. But I have seen firsthand the cost of that choice, that no control leads not to freedom but to chaos. The fledgling company became a jumble of half-baked ideas. Staff fatigue and trust fall. Lesson I learned. Startups require a new form of management that is different from the traditional model but is still management. It is not a tight shirt that squeezes creativity but a framework that keeps the fledgling business from collapsing in the early winds of the last century. Management created industrial empires, bringing unprecedented material prosperity. But that same tool, when applied to startups, turns into a burden. Because the startup environment is not a land of stability but a quicksand of uncertainty and risk. If you consider a company as a car, then stop as the engine that is still being assembled and tested. Run and edit at the same time. It requires a completely different way of driving than a full-size car running on the freeway. Starting a business cannot be planned like launching a rocket. All the details are predetermined, just follow them and you will reach your destination. It's more like driving on the road. Must constantly adjust steering based on actual situation. A plan that is too detailed in a volatile environment is like blinding yourself with unexpected turns. The most painful thing for me in the early days of starting a business was the feeling of waste of human energy, waste of beautiful ideas. Waste of trust. How many companies launch a product only to have the market turn its back on them a few weeks later? How many projects cost millions of dollars and then disappear into oblivion? Each failure is not only a loss of money but also a waste of the most precious resources, time, passion, and human intelligence. So I went looking for a way out, and I realized that it was possible to learn from a seemingly unrelated field. Toyota Lean Manufacturing. A clear distinction is made between value-creating and wasteful activities. They shorten the cycle time, produce in small batches, and learn as they go. I wonder why scient startups do that. Instead of launching the perfect product after years of tinkering, why not just release the smallest possible version? Then observe, learn, adjust. It was the seed of a new approach, lean startup management. Progress is not measured by the number of features written, not measured by the capital raised, but by the amount of real understanding of customers. Every step is guided by questions. What new things have we learned about what customers really need? If the answer is no, then all efforts, no matter how perfect, are wasted. But I don't want the reader to think that this is just theory. Imagine a young company trying to launch a new product. They organize according to the traditional functional model: marketing, engineering, sales, each optimized for its own. The results are self-perceived effective, but the overall picture is confusing. It took months for the product to reach the customer, and by the time feedback arrived it was too late. Measuring the old way makes people cling to false efficiency, while the truth is the whole boat is drifting off course. In contrast, if the same team were organized into a cross-functional team with shared responsibilities, they would be forced to look at customer learning outcomes. Initially they will see a decrease in productivity because they are no longer able to sit comfortably in their professional comfort zone. But gradually the difference appeared: they learned faster, adjust sooner, and create something customers will actually accept. I call this approach measurement by learning validation, and it is the first building block of a new management system. Instead of dreaming about distant horizons, businesses are driven by short loops of testing, observing, and adjusting. Each loop is a step forward, sometimes small but truly sure, and most important. It keeps the ship from sailing in the wrong direction for too long because of early failure. Learning from it is progress, but virtual success, achieving the right plan but going in the wrong direction, is real failure. Who is really an entrepreneur? Many people think of familiar images. Young people in garages, working hard to create new products with the hope of shaking the world. But over the years of traveling and talking to countless people, I realized that definition is too narrow. I have met managers in giant corporations, dressed neatly, working in high-rise offices, and they have the spirit of an entrepreneur. They are not building from scratch, but they are tasked with creating products that have never been seen before. Opening up areas their company has never touched. They know how to maneuver within the internal political machine, knowing how to protect their small team from strict control. And most importantly, they see the future and dare to bet on what never existed. I remember a conversation with a manager named March. He heads a department in a giant company. Tasked with taking the company into the internet age, Ma had it all. A good team. Patronage from superiors. The vision was clear, but he was still troubled. He told me, "We have wood, fire, matches, and paper. But why can't we light the fire? What you lack is a process, a method to turn those scattered elements into a product that burns in the market." I realized that Mar is also an entrepreneur, no different from those in the garage. Starting a business is not about scale or context, but about creating something new in uncertainty. That's why I call them entrepreneurs. Whether they work in the government, a non-profit organization, or a corporation with tens of thousands of employees, from here on, a precise definition is needed. A startup is a human organization designed to create a new product or service under extremely high uncertainty. This definition does not mention scale, industry, or type of ownership. It encapsulates the truth that anyone who embarks on something that has never been done before, in an environment where there is no ready solution, is starting a business. Look at the example of SnapTech X in 2009. A small team came up with a way to pay taxes by phone, take a photo of TV2 and automatically create a declaration. At first, the idea sounded like a joke, too complicated, too bold. But they did not give up, they narrowed the scope, only made a simple version for California. The result was that users were fascinated with just a photo and a few clicks. Everything was handled quickly, the product exploded, and a few years later was launched nationwide. How interesting. SnapTech did not come from a small startup but from Snow Printing, a giant with thousands of employees, billions of dollars in revenue. Even in a corporation, the entrepreneurial spirit can still be aroused if there is a method and support from the leadership. But to have that success, Intui had to go through pain. Founder Scott Cook once realized that within 10 years, most of the company's new products failed. Although Intut was well managed, the old model was no longer suitable, so he was forced to change. He created conditions for employees to experiment faster. Allow failure small, encouraging daring. As a result, instead of one big project each year, teams launched hundreds of experiments in a few months, the difference not in innate talent but in the system that allowed them to learn faster. From there, I became more convinced that startups cannot be limited to the image of young people eating instant noodles in the garage. The truth is that there are entrepreneurs wearing suits sitting in meeting rooms, but their blood is still boiling with the spirit of challenge. There are also groups in government agencies whose goal is not to make a profit but to serve the community, but their journey is also full of uncertainty, also requiring a lean management method. The bottom line. Entrepreneurship is not a label but a way of thinking. Startup is not a hiding place but a journey of discovery. Once you accept to step into the land of uncertainty, you are called an entrepreneur. Regardless of what your employee card says every day. My biggest obsession is not how many lines of code I write, how many new features I launch, or how much capital I raise. What keeps me up at night is the question is, are we really getting closer to a sustainable business? I was trained to believe that progress means staying on schedule, delivering a high-quality product. But when I entered the startup world, I quickly learned the harsh truth. Getting the plan right doesn't matter if the plan is wrong from the start. You can be perfect at building a product. But if no one wants it, it's all wasted effort. This is the deadly trap I call failed success. You hit the right target. But the target doesn't get you anywhere. Like a train racing. But going the wrong way, the faster you go, the further you get from your destination. So we need a different metric. Not instant revenue, not downloads, not fancy reports. What we need to measure is learning, but not the learning fallacy that people use when they fail. At least we learned something. No. What I want is validated learning. That means every step forward must be based on clear evidence that we understand our customers better, understand the market better, and are eliminating false assumptions. Let me tell the story of Imvu, the company I co-founded. At that time, we believed that the instant messaging market was fertile ground, with hundreds of millions of users, but most of them were not paying. Our idea was to create a complementary product that combined in with a 3D virtual world, where users bought digital items to decorate their characters. The strategy sounded perfect, without requiring users to abandon their old IM. Just install the utility, keep friends, and have a new experience. We rushed into work for 6 months day and night until the launch. The product was heavy, full of bugs. But we told ourselves, it's okay, as long as the strategy is right. But when we launched, no one used it, they didn't even bother to download it. The fear of being ridiculed by the press turned out to be more bearable than the silence of the market. We panicked but still persevered and made more changes, bug fixes, interface changes, and still no one cared. Then we started inviting customers to the office to see them use the product. And then the truth emerged. I still clearly remember the image of teenagers sitting in front of the computer. They were excited to create decorative avatars and laugh, but when it came to the part where they had to install the add-on to invite their friends to join, their faces darkened. They said, "I don't want to invite my friends. What if it sucks? My friends will think I'm weird." We tried to explain network effects and community value, but they didn't care. Even though friends getting into something that isn't necessarily cool means social risk, it's a shocking moment. The strategies we draw up, the convincing logic diagrams are completely out of touch with reality. We tried another approach, adding a solo mode. Thought users would have a chance to explore before inviting friends, but the results still didn't improve much. Until we launched the chat feature. With just a press of a button, you are randomly connected to someone who has also pressed the same button. Surprisingly, they were happy, they laughed, they talked, and for the first time we saw the product live. But the joy is short-lived when the user wants to save the new friend to the list. We told them to use the old friends list above. They widened their eyes. Are you kidding? I have dozens of messaging apps. Now you want me to add a stranger to that? Turns out we don't even understand how they actually use messaging tools. The assumptions we take for granted are completely wrong. Through dozens of times like that painful humiliation. Finally we started learning. Learn not from what customers say but from what they do. Learn that what they need is not a complementary product to silence but a new space to communicate, unrelated to the old list of friends. That is the essence of proven learning, not theorizing, not telling pretty stories, but facing the truth. As painful as that truth is, a startup's real progress isn't in the number of lines of code, but in how many false assumptions it eliminates. We set a modest goal the first month of just $300 in revenue, then $350, then $400, small numbers but enough to create pressure to control. When we didn't hit, we were forced to ask why. What was wrong? The answer often led to unexpected changes, dropping features we thought were core, testing completely new approaches. That's the power of proven learning. It turns failure into fuel for the next step. Instead of the end, when I was an engineer, every big project started with a detailed plan, listing features, drawing architectural diagrams, estimating time, allocating manpower. We believe that the more prepared, the less risk. But in starting a business, I soon realized a paradox: the more I tried to predict the future, we are more likely to deceive ourselves into illusion. Starting a business cannot be treated like building an airplane or launching a satellite. There, every detail has to be calculated in advance. Because small errors can lead to big disasters, but startups are different. The environment is so uncertain that no one can predict exactly how customers will react. So instead of a perfect plan, we need a series of experiments that the startup must live in as a laboratory. Every step is a hypothesis to be tested. Every product is an experiment. From here comes the concept of minimum viable product. MVP is not the prettiest version, nor is it perfect, but it is the smallest possible form to test an assumption. MVPs are not designed to impress, but to learn the fastest. Many entrepreneurs hesitate that if they launch an imperfect product, customers will lose trust. But in reality, the perfect product in the eyes of the creator often has nothing to do with the real needs of the customer. I've seen too many companies spend millions of dollars, spend years, just to come up with something no one wants, an MVP. With all its clumsiness, sometimes it is the only way to see the truth. Imagine you have an idea, an application that helps users share images instantly. Instead of building a complex system, you just need to make a simple website, allowing to upload images and send links. If the user likes it, you learn something, if not, you learn something too. And it only took you weeks instead of years. MVP not only saves time and money, but also changes the mindset of the entire team instead of endlessly arguing about what users will like. They started the experiment. Every debate is replaced by a test. Every assumption is exposed to the customer. I remember a company that believed it had to have a perfect payment system before launching a product. They fear that a trading incident will ruin their reputation. But when they delayed construction for months, customers lost interest. By the time it came out, no one cared anymore. If they choose otherwise, roll out a version with a simple manual payment method. Perhaps they learned early on that what customers want isn't a sophisticated payment system, but a completely different experience. MVP is a reminder that we are not so good at guessing that we can predict the market. We can only learn by putting the product in the hands of the customer, and the customer by silent action or strong reaction will answer more honestly than any survey. But MVP is no excuse for sloppiness. It should be enough to test the assumption. Nothing more, nothing less. Releasing a product that is so bad that no one can use it doesn't teach you anything. The challenge is to remove as much as possible while still retaining the core that needs to be tested. Through many stumbles, I learned that every startup is built on a series of bold assumptions. Customers will want this, they will pay for that. The market will react like this, and the first task is not to execute the grand plan but to prove or disprove those assumptions as quickly as possible. The sooner mistakes are discovered, the less waste. This is the point that connects it all. Vision needs to be tested. Starting a business is not about blindly following your hunch, nor is it about waiting for the perfect product. It is the loop between product ideas. Feedback and learning. Each small loop gets us closer to the big goal. And most importantly, MVP is not just a product but a mindset. Once you accept that everything is just an assumption until proven, you will no longer be afraid of small failures. Failure becomes fuel, and experimentation becomes the rudder. This is the spirit I want to convey. Startup success is not due to luck or genius, but to the ability to learn faster than competitors. And to learn faster you must dare to try, dare to fail, and dare to change. Every entrepreneurial journey is built on a shaky foundation of assumptions. We often think that the clearer the idea and the more detailed the plan, the lower the risk. But the truth is, every young company has a few core assumptions. If wrong, everything will collapse. I call them leaps of faith. We often fail to recognize them. We are engrossed in new logos, interfaces, and features. Then, aside from the original questions, does this product really bring value to anyone? And if so, how can we make it reach more people? These are the two fundamental assumptions. Value assumptions and growth assumptions. Assume the value of the question. When users actually experience it, do they find it worthwhile? Did they come back a second time? Are you willing to pay the effort or money to continue? All the flashy features are meaningless if the answer is no. Assume growth goes further even if a group of people like it. How can this product be spread? Will they tell their friends, or will an expensive advertising campaign be needed? What mechanism is there for a new customer to generate another customer if there is no solution for growth? Products are just a short-lived joy, not a business. I have seen many companies go wrong by forgetting these 2 points. They think that just building a better product will open up the market. But the market reality doesn't care about technical sophistication. It only cares whether it satisfies a real need and whether it is replicable. To clarify, imagine a small group pursuing a new idea. They can write hundreds of pages of plans. Revenue forecast, market share graph. But if they cannot answer the above 2 assumptions, then all those plans are just colored illusions. The only way to turn a vision into a reality is to break it down into a testable hypothesis. This is the art of the leap of faith. Dare to admit that you don't know and then turn that unknown into a concrete experiment. For example, if we believe customers will pay for a quick experience, try putting a prototype in front of them and see if we believe users will bring their friends along. Let's measure what percentage actually do it. Pioneers play a special role in this process. They are not the silent majority but the curious ones who dare to try new things, accepting the initial awkwardness. They will give us the first data, the vital signals to know which assumptions have a chance to stand. Elaptus does not reflect the whole market but they are the first window to the truth. Contrary to popular belief. Listening to adapters doesn't mean pandering to their every wish. Sometimes they will ask for strange features that have nothing to do with vision. Our task is to separate the real signal from the noise. Understand that the most valuable thing is not in what they say but in what they do. Many people still cling to their hunch. I'm sure the market will need this. That trust is necessary. Because without it, no one would dare jump off the brink of uncertainty. But blind faith is dangerous. Belief is only valuable when it guides an experiment and that experiment can confirm or disprove it. There is no other way. A stop is a series of falling and landing jumps. Time and time again, we leap with faith but land with data. Every time an assumption is tested, we build another small bridge. Each of those bridges together form the path to a sustainable business. And here's the thing to remember. The biggest assumptions are often hidden in the obvious. Sometimes we take a customer behavior for granted only to find out it doesn't exist. Sometimes we think that the mechanism of propagation is natural, but in fact it requires sophisticated design. It is recognizing and testing the obvious that makes the vital difference. Once we have seen the assumptions and taken the leap of faith, the next question is always how do we test them? Paper plans don't answer that, boardroom debates don't answer that, there's only one way, put products in the hands of real people, in the real world. But with any product, if we wait until everything is perfect, we will spend months, even years, only to find out we were wrong from the start. That's why I emphasize minimum viable product MVP. MVP is not a perfect product but the smallest version enough to learn from. It is not intended to impress investors or the press but to answer a specific question. Is our assumption correct? If the value assumption is that users will pay to save time, MVP can be just a quick manual service without the need for a complex automated system. If growth is assumed, users will invite friends to join. The MVP might just need a simple invite feature to see what percentage actually do so. The bottom line MVP is not an excuse for sloppiness. It should be good enough to give the user an experience but not more than that. It is a surgical knife that cuts through all the fluff, leaving just the right part to test the hypothesis. I remember a catering company that believed customers would love to order lunch online. Instead of building a complex logistics system, they started by posting ads online. When there is an order, they personally buy the food and deliver it to your door. That's the SISH MVP. Manual service to gauge if demand is real. The results were that within weeks they knew the market had traction before spending millions of dollars to automate it. CCMVP, on the other hand, presents a suggestive paradox. Sometimes to learn faster, we need to do it slower, more manually. Because what we need is not efficiency but truth. The results will come when we know we are on the right track. Another form is virtual MVP. When the product does not exist yet, we build an interface to measure demand. For example, create a landing page for a fictional product with a trial sign-up button and measure how many people click it. If no one cares, why build a system if thousands of people click? We know there is a strong signal to invest. Regardless of the form, the MVP spirit is always to learn at the fastest speed, with the least cost. It forces us to leave our illusions, forcing us to face cold feedback from customers. And it is in that collision that we grow up. However, building an MVP is not just a technical issue, it also touches on ego. Many founders fear that MVPs will tarnish their image. They are afraid that customers will think they are sloppy. But the truth is, customers don't care about perfection. They care about whether their needs are met. MVP reminds us to put aside our arrogance and listen to the truth. Every MVP is an experiment. And just like in science, experiments can disprove hypotheses. That is not failure but progress. The only failure is not learning anything after launching the product. Let's go back to the loop. I took a leap of faith. Assumption identification. Now let's test with MVP to see if that assumption holds or falls apart. And most importantly, we must be ready for both possibilities. If the assumption is wrong, MVP helps us know early, avoiding waste. If the assumption is correct, MVP gives us a foundation to scale. MVP is the bridge between vision and data. It turns vague statements into specific questions and turns those questions into clear answers through customer actions. Once a prototype product is out there and in the hands of customers, we enter the hardest part, measuring real progress. MVPs can give us feedback, but if we don't read those signals, we're lost in delusion. Many teams get caught up in flashy numbers. App downloads increased, website traffic increased, and the number of registered accounts surpassed this milestone and that milestone. Those are vanity metrics. Looks good but tells us nothing about whether the company is on the right track or not. You can spend money on advertising and see the numbers increase. But that doesn't prove that customers really value the product. What we need, on the contrary, is an action index. Numbers associated with decisions. For example, what percentage of users return after the first week? How many people refer a new customer? How many people are willing to pay instead of just using it for free? Action metrics force us to look at the truth because it is tied to repeated behavior, not the passing curiosity that drives these metrics. A powerful tool is cluster analysis instead of looking at the total. We divide customers into groups according to when they started using the product and then we track each group over time. If the newest group is more engaged than the older group, we know the product is improving. Otherwise, even if the total number of users increases, the nature remains unchanged. We are just adding water to a bucket. I remember a startup team that spent tens of thousands of dollars on advertising and was delighted to see a spike in app downloads. But when analyzed by cohort, they were shocked to find that only a few % of users remained after a week. The rest disappeared, the increasing numbers were just an illusion. They are not actually progressing. Analyst exposes growth illusion to reveal the naked truth. Another technique I often recommend is testing on a very small scale. Instead of spending a huge budget, spend just $5 a day on advertising, enough to bring in a few dozen new customers every day. From there, we have continuous data to learn these small numbers. If measured correctly, it is worth many times more than $1 million campaign that lacks transparency. All these tools come together in one innovative accounting system. In this model, we establish clear learning milestones. First, we make an assumption. For example, 30% of users will return within the first week. Then we measure the actual result. If it is not achieved, we must adjust. If we achieve, we have a basis to move on. Innovation accounting turns intangible progress into measurable progress, learning into accountability. This is especially important in relationships with investors and leaders. Instead of just telling beautiful stories or presenting slides full of summary graphs, startups can say that last month only 10% of users returned after the first week. This month we raised it to 15%, which is still low. But the trend is real, and it's a clear demonstration of progress. Small but sure, more importantly, it creates internal discipline. Instead of rejoicing over empty achievements, the group was forced to look at real numbers. Every time we learn, the question is not what have we done but what have we learned, and has the learning led to a change in customer behavior? True measurement is the compass that guides a startup. Know it. We will be swept away by the illusion. Only with it do we know where we are going. Even small steps. After taking a leap of faith, testing with MVP, measuring with proper metrics, we come to the hardest question. Is it time to pivot or move on? This was not a spontaneous decision. It doesn't come from boredom or sudden excitement, but from real data. Pivot is a structured change, keeping what has proven to be right, removing what is wrong. Perseverance is to continue improving on the current course because the evidence shows it is valuable. Many teams make mistakes on both sides. Some people are too stubborn, clinging to their original ideas. Even though the data shows customers don't care, they think adding features and tweaking the interface will save everything. They end up burning resources in return. Some people are so impatient to pivot that they change their ideas constantly, not giving their hypotheses enough time to be tested. As a result, they learn nothing, just run around in circles. To avoid these two extremes, I recommend having regular meetings, pivot or follow-up. It's that moment when the team sits down, looks at the data, and makes a decision together. Not based on emotions, not based on an individual, but based on evidence. This meeting is where discipline and honesty meet. Consider the story of a company once called K-King. They started with a bold idea, creating an online game where users simulated investing, tracked performance, and competed. The product looks interesting. But when they launched it, they realized that most players considered it a pastime, not a serious tool. The initial value assumption is that users will find the investment simulation a truly rewarding experience. Having failed, the founding team was faced with the choice of continuing to add features to the game to make it more engaging or pivoting in another direction. They looked at the data and realized that what users were most interested in wasn't just playing for fun, but having access to quality investment ideas from experts. From that seed, they spun it into a real investment platform with real money, allowing retail users to learn from professional investors. And the new name WF was born. That is the essence of pivot, not to throw everything away but to keep the core value found and change the shell that makes it narrow. The tree takes away the game but keeps the idea of connecting people with good investment strategies. There are many types of pivots that change the customer base, change the distribution channel, change the way of making money, even change the underlying technology. But the common point is that each pivot is based on real lessons from the market. It is not a blind rotation but a conscious step towards testing a new hypothesis. And sometimes the right decision is persevere. Continue. If the data shows the assumption is correct, if the action index is improving, then the task is not to rotate but to accelerate. Many startups die not because of wrong assumptions but because they give up too soon. Perk requires patience, while pivot requires courage. Both are difficult but both require discipline to avoid extremes. The survival question for startups is not whether we can do it, but whether we are learning faster than others. Pivot or persevere are just rhythm in the learning process, as long as you learn quickly. We have a chance to survive and thrive. Each loop ends with a pivot or persevere question. Every decision takes us down a new path or continues to hone in on an old one. And so, through countless loops, the vision gradually emerged from illusion to reality. If I had to pick an image to describe how most companies work, I would pick the old production line, raw materials in one end, finished products out the other, with huge batches stacked in between waiting to be processed for a long time. This model was considered reasonable because it saved cost per unit and reduced the number of process setups. But in the startup world, where the most valuable thing is not cost, but learning speed, that practice becomes a shackle. The batch size reduction principle opens up another avenue. Instead of waiting a whole month to collect enough products to launch, we reduce them to small units and release them continuously. Each small unit is like an experiment sent out, bringing back instant feedback. It is that feedback that is the oxygen for a young business. When I see a billboard with a long line of unfinished items, I know there is hidden waste, unfinished work. From untested customer designs to unreleased code, it's all dead stock that takes up space, consumes energy, and doesn't deliver learning. The more inventory, the slower the feedback loop, the more hidden the risk of mistakes. To change, we need a new principle. Hypothetical thinking. In traditional manufacturing, work is pulled based on customer demand. Customers order starter kits in startups. What customers say is not necessarily true. What we need is not words but learning. So it's not the customer that pulls, but the hypothesis that needs testing that pulls the work. We start by asking what we need to learn and then determine what we need to measure to know it. And finally, what is the smallest thing that can be measured when applying this thinking? A long series of work is broken down into specific experiments. Instead of a 6-month project with dozens of features, we can roll out a change within hours and measure its impact immediately. The results may be small but they are tangible, and a series of small results add up to big progress. To do. Need technical foundations and culture of deployment. Continuous deployment is a typical example. Every small change is automatically put into the system if it passes testing. Any errors are detected immediately instead of accumulating in large batches and then exploding. But continuous deployment only makes sense when it is accompanied by discipline. I once witnessed a team applying a mechanism like the emergency brake in a Toyota factory. If a defect is discovered, anyone has the right to pull the strings. Release stopped. Product frozen until the bug is fixed. Many companies fear this mechanism because they think it will slow them down, but in fact it is the guarantee of sustainable speed. We prevent small errors from becoming disasters, prevent one mistake from spreading to millions of users. A product immune system is built. Protect the group from the deadly spiral of the big batch. Take the story of Alphabet Energy, an energy technology company. At first they also rushed into doing massive projects, taking on too many unfinished jobs. As a result, everyone is busy but no one learns anything. When they switched to a pull hypothesis, reduced VIP, and split testing organization, the pace of learning changed dramatically, with small groups focusing on a specific hypothesis, running experiments, collecting data, and then going back to tweak. They catch things wrong early, saving huge amounts of time and resources, and deploy small quickly. Safety is the key to keeping the learning loop going. Small so that the risk each time we try does not make us fall. Be quick so we don't get buried in huge piles of work. Be safe so that every mistake becomes a learning opportunity, not a fatal blow. I used to believe that releasing more features at once was more impressive. But the more things that are thrown out at once, the harder it is to know what produces the results. In contrast, each small change is a clean, readable experiment. It helps us know what really works and what is just noise. Batch size reduction is not just a technique but a way of looking at the world that forces us to abandon our obsession with completeness. To accept the small but real reality of progress requires courage. Because many organizations consider small steps trivial, but it is the small steps that add up to the big journey. A company can create a product that customers love, but without a mechanism to scale, it will remain small. The question that always haunts me is, where does growth come from and how can it be sustained? Over the years, I have come to realize there are 3 clear paths. I call them growth engines. Like 3 different machines. Each operates on its own logic. A successful startup must pick a core engine, refine it to its maximum, and then think about combining it. First is the sticky engine, keeping customers. Here growth comes from customer retention. The weight is not the number of downloads but the churn rate. If you lose 10% of your customers each month, you have to gain 10% more new customers to stay the same size. But if retained well, each loyal customer will create value for months and years. The core of sticky is improving the experience so much that people don't want to leave. The second is the viral engine. Here growth comes from each customer bringing new customers. The key metric is the viral coefficient. If the average user attracts more than one other person, the product will explode exponentially. Sometimes it's just a small detail that makes the difference. Remember the Hotmail PSJ message attached to the end of every email sent. It turned every user into a free advertising channel and Hotmail exploded. Viral doesn't need a huge advertising budget but does require clever design to make the viral behavior feel natural. Third is the PS engine growing by spending. Here businesses spend money to attract new customers but the secret lies in the difference. If the lifetime value of a customer is greater than the cost of acquisition, then every dollar spent, the company earned more. PET does not rely on magic but on disciplined mathematics. These three engines may sound separate, but the important point is that a company should only focus on one primary engine at a time. If you run ads aggressively, trying to spread the word, and trying to retain customers, your data will be in disarray. You won't know which factors are actually driving growth and which are just noise. I once witnessed a startup team immersed in a colorful dashboard. Dozens of indicators run in parallel. Each person looks at something different, arguing endlessly. As a result they do not make any progress. It was only when they chose to focus on skin retention that things became clear. Every small change is measured in churn rate. From then on, the group knew they were making real progress, no longer fooled by illusions, but sometimes the original motivation was no longer effective. At that time, turning the growth engine became a survival choice at VU. We had hoped Vero would take the product far. But after many trials, the propagation coefficient never exceeded 1. If we continue to cling, we will drown. So we pivoted to P. We learned how to drip, measure every dollar spent, fine-tune conversion rates, and eventually achieve a scalable model. Turning the engine doesn't mean giving up on the vision, it means finding the right path to make the vision happen. Once the engine is running smoothly, we will feel what is called product market fit in a quantitative sense. That's when the market starts pulling product out of our hands, new customers come in faster than we can serve them. Newspapers started writing, investors called, competitors were worried. Product market fit isn't some vague feeling, it's when the growth engine starts running on its own. We just need to add fuel. These three motives are like 3 roads up the mountain. Every road has its own landscape, its own challenges. Choose the wrong road. You may get exhausted halfway but choose right and persevere. The mountain top will appear, growth can explode. But if the system does not adapt, it will collapse from within. The more developed, the more complex the product, the larger the organization, the more likely errors and crises appear. The question is not whether there will be mistakes, but how to organize learning from mistakes faster than they occur. The principle I believe in here is disciplined adaptation, not putting out fires where they flare up but building a mechanism to catch all the errors. Even small things become lasting lessons. The tool I often use is 5WH, ask why 5 times when a bug appears. Instead of stopping at the surface, we keep asking why until we reach the root. If the system crashes for an hour, the cause is not just the server is down. Why is the server down? Since the software has not been tested thoroughly, why not test it? Since the team lacks automation tools, why lack of tools? Because no one is responsible for implementation. So after asking a few times, we found out that the root error was not in the server but in the process. 5 turns a temporary incident into an opportunity for long-term reform. However, FWIS is not a magic wand. I saw it fail at IGN when first applied. The group gathered all the baggage from the past into one long list of causes analysis. No one knows where to start fixing it. The meeting turned into a venting session, resulting in FW being abandoned as a useless tool. Lesson here. 5 wishes are only effective if implemented at the right time and in the right way. It should happen while the incident is still hot, with enough people involved and everyone clearly understanding the goal not to blame but to learn, so it should be clearly explained at the beginning of the session. We will dig until we find an actionable root cause that is not condemnatory. When done correctly, the 5 Ws become a continuous learning loop. Every small mistake leads to a small improvement. Instead of an organization that only focuses on firefighting, we have an organization that gets stronger with each fall, where quality and speed become allies. No longer enemies, many still think they have to choose between speed or quality assurance. But with adaptive mechanisms, these two become one as the system is designed to detect immediate business consequences. Every release becomes a learning opportunity. Like a car with good brakes. You dare to go fast because you know you can stop safely. An example I have witnessed. A software group that applies continuous deployment, incorporating an automatic braking mechanism. Whenever a change causes a customer-affecting error, the system immediately stops the release. The team focused on fixing the root cause and stopped releasing more bugs. Initially, the release rate slowed down. Many people complained, but after a few months the quality increased, problems decreased and the pace was faster than before. Disciplined adaptation is the only way to maintain a long-term learning rhythm. If you only know how to run without learning, you will hit the wall. If you only learn and not run, you will be left behind. The trick is to drive, learn, and fix your bike on the go. And that can only be achieved when organizations dare to face the truth of every little mistake. Rather than hiding or blaming, as a company grows and becomes so massive, innovation is often pushed to the margins. Small groups of startups within the corporation are hidden in a black box, away from prying eyes and interference from the existing system. But then one day, they were forced to announce the product. At that moment, the mother organization was stunned, reacting as if stabbed by a knife. The problem is not protecting startups from corporations, but protecting corporations from startup shock. Innovation cannot be a secret game. It needs to be put in the right framework. To both allow risk-taking and keep the overall system safe. This is Innovation Sandbox. Innovation sandboxes become important. Sandbox is a range barrier, in which the startup team is empowered to own an experiment from start to finish, design, build, deploy, measure. But the scope of the experiment was limited, affecting only a small group of customers for a short period of time. On some specific properties. This allows the team to apply the approach to the entire startup without threatening the entire company. Sandbox lets courage try. But not to let the risk spread, Spox's conditions are clear. The only group that owns the experiment and does not share ambiguous responsibility. The test duration is predetermined. To avoid stretching indefinitely, the customer and functional scope is narrowed down, so that the impact is controlled and most importantly when the test is over. Data is shared publicly within the organization for everyone to learn together. I have seen a financial services group adopt Spox. Instead of launching a new product to millions of customers at once, they choose a small segment. People who try the app for 3 months. Within that limit, the team has full control to change the interface and add feedback measurement features. Once the test was successful, the company expanded to all customers thanks to Sunbot. They both avoid systemic risk and keep the flame of innovation alive. Innovation Sandbox is not just a management technique but a culture. It sends the message that in this organization innovation is not the exception but the accepted rule of the game. It turns curiosity and risk into something legitimate, protected and encouraged. From Sunbobs, we can build a sustainable culture of innovation instead of a few secret rebel groups. Every department can propose experiments within their scope instead of waiting for the big idea from the leader. Hundreds of small experiments germinate at once, most of which will fail. But every failure is data, is progress. Gradually, the company becomes a self-learning ecosystem, where innovation is not a special project but a daily breath. The ultimate goal is not to create more new products, but to create an organization that articulates its assumptions, tests them rigorously, and eliminates all waste that does not lead to learning. Then the company can not only survive each change but can also be continuously reborn. I believe that the greatest waste prevention is not saving money or time, but stopping wasting human intelligence and passion. Every time a team works hard on a project that the client doesn't need, it's a tragedy. But when an organization knows how to create an environment where every effort produces a lesson, no effort is in vain. Innovation is not random. It is a system, and that system, if nurtured, can turn a cumbersome corporation into a flexible body, always ready to learn, adapt and grow. Every work of knowledge ends not with a full stop but with an opening door. This book, with its entire journey from starting, defining, learning, experimenting, navigating to accelerating and innovating, shows a different approach. Entrepreneurship is not just a gamble but can be a science of disciplined experimentation and learning. There is a red thread running through that train of thought. Humans cannot avoid uncertainty but can turn uncertainty into fuel for learning. When we reduce illusions, shorten the loop, and face the truth from the smallest signals, every step, no matter how fragile, becomes certain. This is not just an approach for those starting a company, but for anyone facing the challenge of innovation in a volatile environment. The most important thing is not to memorize each concept but to turn them into a new lens through which to look at the reality around you. Ask yourself, what are the beliefs that are driving my actions? What data do I have to verify it? Is my learning curve moving fast enough to stay ahead of the curve? Thank you for listening patiently until the last lines. Your presence is proof that knowledge is not just written, but lived, pondered, and debated. If you feel this book has given you a new perspective, I would love for you to share your comments. Whether agreeable or disagreeable, that feedback is part of the learning cycle, not just for me but for the entire community of people seeking smarter ways to do business. And finally, I want to invite you to be a part of the next journey. If there is a book you would like to hear or see analyzed, please suggest it. Each of your suggestions not only opens a piece of work, but can open a new conversation, another round of learning. Because knowledge never stops. And so is our journey. Thanks for listening. And